They told him it was impossible. The top neurologists at Johns Hopkins, the specialists in Zurich. They all said the same thing: Sofia Moretti would never take another step. Her father, Lorenzo Moretti, the most feared capo in New York, had enough money to buy nations. But he couldn't buy a miracle. He had resigned himself to a life of cold vengeance and a paralyzed daughter. That was until the new maid arrived. She wasn't just there to clean. She was hiding a secret that could heal his daughter or get them all killed. This is the story of how a woman with nothing changed the man who had everything. The iron gates of the estate in Saddle River, New Jersey, didn't just close. They sealed the world out with a heavy hydraulic hiss. Clara Holloway sat in the back of the blacked-out SUV, her hands folded tightly in her lap to stop them from trembling. The driver, a man with a neck thick as a tree stump and a scar running through his left eyebrow, hadn't spoken a word since picking her up at the train station. He didn't need to. The Glock 19, visibly printing against his tailored suit jacket, said enough. Clara wasn't Clara Holloway here. On the paperwork provided by the staffing agency, she was Clara Hayes, a woman with a clean background, a GED, and zero connections to the medical world. If these men knew who she really was, or rather what she used to be before the scandal at Mount Sinai Hospital destroyed her life, she wouldn't be getting a job. She'd be getting a shallow grave. "We're here," the driver grunted. The mansion was less of a home and more of a fortress. Victorian architecture reinforced with bulletproof glass and surveillance cameras that pivoted like predatory birds. This was the home of Lorenzo Enzo Moretti. The press called him a logistics consultant. The FBI called him the head of the Moretti crime family. Clara was ushered through the service entrance, past a security checkpoint that rivaled the TSA, and into a library that smelled of old leather and stale cigar smoke. "Mr. Moretti will see you now." Lorenzo Moretti was standing by the window, his back to her. He was taller than she expected, wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than her father's house. When he turned, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was devastatingly handsome in a sharp, brutal way, dark eyes that assessed threats in microseconds, a jawline tense with perpetual aggression. "You're the new help," Enzo said. It wasn't a question. His voice was a low baritone, rough like gravel. "Yes, sir. Clara Hayes." Enzo walked toward her, stopping just inside her personal space. "Let's get the rules straight, Miss Hayes. You clean, you serve meals, you do the laundry, you do not speak to my associates, you do not answer the front door, and most importantly," he paused, his eyes narrowing, "you do not bother my daughter with fairy tales. Sophia is 7 years old. She is paralyzed from the waist down. That is her reality. If I catch you trying to give her hope or suggesting religious miracles, you will be out on the street before you can blink. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir," Clara said, keeping her voice steady despite the rapid thumping of her heart. "Good. Mrs. Rossi will show you to your quarters." For the first 3 days, Clara was invisible. She scrubbed marble floors until her knees bruised and polished silver, until her reflection looked back at her, distorted and tired. She learned the rhythm of the house. The guards changed shifts at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Enzo left at 8 a.m. in an armored Mercedes S-Class and returned at irregular hours, often smelling of gunpowder or bourbon. And Sophia was a ghost. The 7-year-old girl spent her days in the sunroom, strapped into a high-end Permobil power wheelchair. She was beautiful with her father's dark curls and her mother's tragic, wide eyes. But she was withering away. She barely ate. She didn't speak. She just stared at the garden she couldn't walk in. On the fourth day, Clara was dusting the bookshelves in the sunroom, while Sophia sat motionless. The girl's nurse, a severe woman named Nurse Ratched. No Nurse Clien, was on her phone loudly complaining about her boyfriend, completely ignoring the child. "Yeah, I know," Clien said into her phone, turning her back to Sophia. "It's boring as hell. The kid is a vegetable. Just sits there." Clara's grip tightened on her duster. Vegetable. The medical term was offensive, inaccurate, and cruel. Clara watched Sophia. The girl's hand was resting on the armrest of the chair. A butterfly, a monarch, landed on the glass of the window. Sophia's eyes tracked it. As the butterfly fluttered upward, Clara saw it a tiny microscopic twitch in Sophia's right calf muscle. It was faint. To a layperson, it was nothing. But Clara wasn't a layperson. Before she was a maid, she was Dr. Clara Halloway, a rising star in pediatric neurorehabilitation. She had spent 10 years studying the plasticity of the spinal cord. That twitch wasn't a spasm. It was intention. The nerve pathways weren't dead. They were dormant. Clara froze. The doctors had declared it a complete T10 spinal severance, irreversible. But a complete severance didn't twitch in reaction to visual stimuli. This was a misdiagnosis. Or worse, negligence. Nurse Clien hung up the phone and sighed. "All right, Sophia. Time for your meds." She grabbed a bottle of baclofen, a heavy muscle relaxer. "Wait." Clara said the word escaping her mouth before she could stop it. Nurse Clien turned sneering. "Excuse me." The maid speaks. "Should she be taking that much baclofen in the middle of the day?" Clara asked, lowering her head submissively. "It makes her so drowsy she can't eat her lunch." "I don't remember asking for your opinion," Clien snapped. "Stick to the dust bunnies, sweetie. Leave the medicine to the professionals." Clien shoved the pill into Sophia's mouth and forced her to swallow water. Within 20 minutes, the light in Sophia's eyes dimmed, and she slumped in her chair, the twitch gone, the potential buried under chemical sedation. Clara walked out of the room, her blood boiling. They weren't treating her. They were sedating her. Enzo Moretti thought he was protecting his daughter, but he was paying people to keep her in a coma. Clara knew the risks. She knew Enzo had threatened to fire her or worse for interfering, but she looked at the security cameras in the hallway and made a choice. She couldn't be a doctor here, but she could be something else. She waited until nightfall. The mansion was quiet, save for the hum of the HVAC system and the occasional crunch of tires on gravel outside as the perimeter guard circled. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Clara crept out of the servants' quarters. She wasn't wearing her maid uniform. She wore black yoga pants and a fitted t-shirt, remnants of her old life. She moved silently, avoiding the floorboards she had identified as squeaky during her cleaning shifts. She reached Sophia's room. The door was ajar. A nightlight cast a soft pink glow over the room. Sophia was asleep, but restlessly. The heavy blankets were tucked tight around her legs, a psychological cage. Clara approached the bed. She whispered, "Sophia." The girl's eyes snapped open. She didn't scream. She was too used to being handled by strangers. She just looked terrified. "It's okay," Clara whispered, kneeling by the bed. "I'm Clara, the one who cleans the library. I'm not going to hurt you." Sophia stared at her, blinking slowly. "I saw you watching the butterfly today," Clara said softly. "I saw your leg move." Sophia's eyes widened. She shook her head slightly. No. Everyone said she couldn't move. I saw it. Clara insisted, her voice fierce, but hushed. The doctors, they think your legs are asleep forever, but I think they're just waiting for you to wake them up. Clara pulled the blanket back. Sophia's legs were atrophied thin from months of disuse. Clara placed her hands gently on Sophia's ankles. I'm going to press on a spot near your ankle. Tell me if you feel anything. Not pain, just pressure. Clara found the posterior tibial nerve. She applied specific targeted pressure, a technique she had published a paper on 3 years ago. Sophia gasped. You felt that? Clara asked. Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. It tingled. Clara's heart soared. Sensation. The cord wasn't severed. It was likely compressed, or the initial swelling had gone down, and the nerves were trying to reconnect. But the heavy sedation and lack of therapy had caused learned non-use. Listen to me, Sophia, Clara said, leaning in close. We can fix this, but it has to be our secret. Your daddy, he's sad and he's scared. If he knows, he might stop us, because he doesn't want you to get hurt. We have to be ninjas. Can you be a ninja with me? A tiny, fragile smile broke across Sophia's face. It was the first time she had smiled in 6 months. She nodded. Okay, we start now. For the next 2 weeks, Clara lived a double life. By day, she was the submissive maid, keeping her head down, taking verbal abuse from Nurse Clyan and avoiding Enzo's piercing gaze. By night, she was a physical therapist again. She didn't have equipment, so she improvised. She used heavy encyclopedias as weights. She used a silk scarf to help Sophia lift her legs. She massaged the atrophied muscles to stimulate blood flow, flushing out the sedatives that Nurse Clyan pumped into her during the day. The progress was slow, agonizingly so, but it was real. On the 10th night, Sophia moved her right big toe on command. On the 14th night, she could flex her ankle. But the danger was growing. One morning, Enzo didn't leave at 8 a.m. Clara was in the kitchen polishing the copper pots when Enzo stormed in, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked furious. He slammed a file onto the marble island, startling Clara. I don't care what the leverage is, Stefano. Enzo roared into the phone. The shipment was light. Find out who skimmed off the top, or I will bury them in the foundation of the new casino. He hung up and threw the phone onto the counter. He looked at Clara, his eyes wild with stress. He rubbed his temples. Coffee, he barked. Black. Yes, sir. Clara moved quickly, pouring a fresh cup from the French press. As she handed it to him, she noticed his hand was shaking. Not from fear. Enzo Moretti feared nothing but from exhaustion. He took a sip and looked at her. Really looked at her. You look tired, Hayes. You not sleeping? Clara froze. I sleep fine, sir. Just, the house is large. Lots to clean. Enzo narrowed his eyes. You've been here 2 weeks. Usually the maids quit by now. Or Cleon fires them. I need the job, sir. Enzo took a step closer. He smelled of sandalwood and danger. My daughter seems different, brighter. She actually ate breakfast today. Clara held her breath. That's good to hear, sir. Is it you? Enzo asked, his voice low. Sir. Are you feeding her sugar? Telling her stories? I warned you. I haven't told her any stories, Mr. Moretti. Maybe she's just Getting better." Enzo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "She doesn't get better. That's the point." He finished the coffee and slammed the mug down. "Keep the house clean. Stay out of the way. I have a meeting here tonight. The underbosses are coming. Stay in your room after 8 p.m. If I see you wandering the halls, I'll assume you're a spy." "Yes, sir." That night, the house was swarming with men. SUVs lined the driveway. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. Clara stayed in her room, as ordered, but her mind was on Sophia. Tonight was a breakthrough night. They were going to try standing for the first time. She checked her watch. 11 p.m. The meeting should be over. The house was quiet. Clara opened her door and slipped into the hallway. She moved toward the staircase. Below in the foyer, the lights were dim. She thought everyone had left. She reached Sophia's room and slipped inside. Sophia was awake, eyes shining in the dark. "Ready," Sophia whispered. "Ready." Clara helped Sophia sit up. She slid Sophia's feet to the floor. "Okay, hold my hands. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Sophia strained. Her little legs shook violently. Sweat popped out on her forehead. Clara took 80% of the weight, then 70%. "Push, Sophia! Push through the heels!" Clara whispered urgently. Sophia gritted her teeth. She stood. Her knees were locked, shaking, but she was upright. I'm doing it. Sophia squeaked. "You are. You're amazing." Suddenly, the door handle turned. Clara gasped and shoved Sophia back onto the bed, throwing the covers over her just as the door swung open. The hallway light flooded the room. A silhouette stood in the doorway. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't a guard. It was Enzo, and he was holding a gun. "Get away from my daughter," he snarled, raising the weapon. Clara threw her hands up, placing her body between the gun and the child. "Mr. Moretti, please, it's not what you think." "I told you," Enzo said, his voice shaking with rage. He stepped into the room, the silencer pointed directly at Clara's chest. "I told you what happens to people who disobey me. Who sent you the Russos?" "The FBI. No one, I'm helping her." "Liar," Enzo cocked the hammer. "You're hurting her. You're disturbing her peace." "Daddy, no!" Sophia screamed. Enzo's eyes flicked to the bed. "Sophia, close your eyes." "No, Daddy, look." Sophia threw the covers off. Before Clara could stop her, Sophia swung her legs over the side of the bed. "Sophia, don't," Clara cried. She wasn't strong enough yet to do it alone. But adrenaline is a powerful drug. Sophia planted her feet on the hardwood floor. She grabbed the nightstand for balance. Her legs wobbled, knees knocking together. Enzo froze. The gun lowered slightly, his mouth parting in shock. Sophia gritted her teeth, looked her father in the eye, and pushed. She rose. She stood there unsupported for 3 seconds, swaying like a sapling in a storm. I can walk, Daddy," she whispered. Then her knees buckled. Clara lunged forward and caught her before she hit the floor, cradling the child in her arms. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Enzo dropped the gun. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. He fell to his knees, crawling across the room until he was right in front of them. He reached out a shaking hand, touching Sophia's leg, then her face. "Sophia." He choked out, tears streaming down his face, the first tears he had shed since his wife died. He looked up at Clara. The rage was gone, replaced by a confusion so deep it looked like pain. "Who are you?" Clara held Sophia tight, looking back at the most dangerous man in New York. "My name isn't Clara Hayes," she said softly. "And we need to talk." The silence in the bedroom was broken only by the heavy, shuddering breaths of Lorenzo Moretti. He was still on his knees staring at his daughter's legs as if they were holy relics. "Get up," Enzo said finally. His voice was devoid of emotion, terrifyingly flat. He stood up, wiping his face with the back of his hand, instantly composing himself back into the cold, untouchable dawn. He pointed the gun at the floor, but he didn't put it away. "Sophia, go to sleep. We will talk in the morning." "But Daddy—" "Sleep. Now!" He turned to Clara. "Library. Move!" Clara followed him. Her legs felt like lead. She knew she had just saved his daughter. But she also knew men like Enzo didn't like surprises, and they didn't like liars. In the library, Enzo poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He didn't offer her any. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, placing the gun atop a stack of files. "Start talking," he said. "And if I detect a single lie, you won't leave this room." Clara took a deep breath. She straightened her spine. She wasn't a maid anymore. "My name is Dr. Clara Holloway. Until 8 months ago, I was the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Mount Sinai." Enzo's eyes flickered. He recognized the name. Holloway. The Angel of Death scandal. Clara flinched. The media had been cruel. "That's what the tabloids called me. I performed a high-risk spinal reconstruction on the son of Senator Sterling. The surgery was a success. But 2 days later, the boy died of an embolism. The toxicology report showed a lethal dose of heparin in his system." "You overdosed a senator's son?" Enzo asked, raising an eyebrow. "I didn't," Clara said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I prescribed the correct dosage. Someone changed the charts. Someone swapped the IV bags. I tried to prove it, but the hospital needed a scapegoat to avoid a lawsuit from the senator. They fired me. They stripped my license. The medical board blacklisted me. I lost my home, my savings, my reputation. No one would hire me. So, I became Clara Hayes." Enzo studied her. He was a human lie detector, a man who survived by reading micro-expressions. He saw the pain in her eyes, but more importantly, he saw the conviction. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Why my house?" "I needed a job where no one would look for Dr. Holloway. And when I saw Sophia, when I saw her chart..." Clara stepped forward, her fear replaced by professional indignation. "Mr. Moretti, your daughter's spinal cord was not severed. It was bruised. She suffered from spinal shock, followed by severe atrophy. But the doctor you hired, Dr. Ahris, and that nurse, Klein, what about them?" Enzo's voice dropped an octave. "They have been keeping her sedated. The baclofen dosage was 3 times the recommended limit for a child her weight. They weren't treating her. They were keeping her quiet so they could collect a paycheck without doing any work. It is medical malpractice, and frankly it borders on torture." Enzo went very still. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number. "Luca," Enzo said into the phone. "Bring Nurse Klein to the basement. Do not let her leave the property. And find Dr. Ahris. I don't care if he's in the Hamptons. Bring him to me." He hung up. He looked at Clara. "You say you can make her walk." "I can't promise a marathon," Clara said honestly. But she stood up tonight, with aggressive physical therapy, hydrotherapy, and the removal of those sedatives. Yes, she can walk. Enzo stood up. He walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. For the first time, he didn't look at her like a servant. He looked at her like an asset. "You are no longer the maid," Enzo declared. "You are Sophia's private physician. You will have whatever equipment you need. You will have a budget. You will move into the guest suite next to Sophia's room." "Thank you, Mr. Moretti." "Don't thank me yet," Enzo said, his eyes dark. "Because if you fail, or if I find out you had anything to do with that senator's son dying, I will make your life very short. We have a deal." Clara looked at the gun on the desk, then at the man who would do anything for his daughter. "We have a deal." 3 months passed. The transformation of the Moretti estate was absolute. The sunroom, once a place of stagnant depression, had been converted into a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center. Parallel bars, resistance bands, and a heated hydrotherapy pool had been installed. Sophia Moretti was a fighter. Freed from the chemical fog of the sedatives, her personality exploded. She was sassy, brilliant, and stubborn, just like her father. "Come on! Sophia, pick up the knees!" Clara shouted, clapping her hands. Sophia was in the parallel bars, sweat dripping down her nose. She wore custom-made leg braces. "I hate this," she grunted. "I know you hate it. Do it anyway." Sophia groaned, but she took another step, then another. She reached the end of the bars and looked up. Enzo was standing in the doorway. He had come home early. He leaned against the doorframe watching them. The hard lines of his face had softened over the last few months. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, and his tie was loosened. "Good form," Enzo said. Sophia beamed. "Daddy, did you see I did 10 laps?" "I saw," Enzo said, walking over. He kissed the top of her head. "Go get cleaned up." Mrs. Rossi made lasagna. As Sophia was wheeled away by a new, much kinder nurse named Beatrice, Enzo turned to Clara. "You look tired," he said. It was the same thing he had said months ago, but the tone was different. It wasn't an accusation. It was concern. "It's a good tired," Clara said, wiping her forehead with a towel. She felt self-conscious. She was wearing yoga pants and a tank top, her hair in a messy bun. Enzo looked like a GQ model, even after a day of running a criminal empire. "Join me for a drink?" Enzo asked. It was the first time he had invited her to spend time with him outside of discussing Sophia's medical charts. They sat on the terrace overlooking the expansive gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange. Enzo poured her a glass of vintage Barolo. "I looked into your case," Enzo said, suddenly. Clara froze her glass halfway to her mouth. "My case. Senator Sterling's son. I have friends in the digital forensics world." Enzo swirled his wine. "They found the deleted logs from the hospital server. The orders to change the medication didn't come from your terminal. They came from the hospital administrator's override code." Clara felt the tears prick her eyes. "I knew it, but I couldn't prove it." "You couldn't. I could." Enzo took a sip. The administrator had a sudden gambling debt paid off 2 days after the boy died, paid by a shell company linked to Senator Sterling's political rival. It was a hit. The boy was collateral damage to ruin the senator's re-election. You were just the fall guy. Clara stared at him. The weight that had been crushing her chest for a year suddenly lifted, leaving her lightheaded. "You found proof." "I have the logs on a drive," Enzo said calmly. "I sent a copy to the FBI anonymously this morning. By tomorrow, your name will be cleared. You can go back to being Dr. Halloway. You can work at any hospital in the world, Ghoul. Clara looked at him. This man, a criminal, a killer, had done more for her justice in 3 months than the legal system had done in a year. Why? She whispered. Enzo looked at her, his dark eyes locked onto hers. The air between them crackled with an unspoken tension that had been building for weeks. Because you gave me my daughter back, and the Morettis always pay their debts. He leaned in closer. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. He was close enough that she could smell the expensive scotch and the danger radiating off him. So, Enzo said, his voice low, now that you're free, will you leave? Clara looked at his lips, then his eyes. She thought of the sterile white halls of Mount Sinai. She thought of the lonely apartment she used to live in. Then she thought of Sophia's laugh and the way Enzo looked at her right now. I haven't finished the job, Clara whispered. She's not walking unassisted yet. Enzo smiled. It was a genuine, devastating smile. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jaw. Good. He leaned in. Clara didn't pull away. Their lips were inches apart. Boom! The explosion shattered the evening. The front gates of the estate erupted in a fireball of twisted metal and concrete. The ground shook. Car alarms began to wail instantly. Enzo was moving before Clara even registered the sound. He tackled her, throwing them both to the stone floor of the terrace, shielding her body with his. Stay down, he roared. Gunfire erupted from the tree line surrounding the estate. Automatic weapons. Enzo pulled his handgun from his waistband. He was never without it. He crawled toward the edge of the terrace, firing blindly into the darkness to provide cover. Sophia! Clara screamed, scrambling to get up. She's in the house! Stay here, Enzo commanded. No. Clara scrambled to her feet, adrenaline flooding her system. She ran toward the French doors, leading back into the house. The hallway was chaos. The security team was engaging targets outside. Glass was shattering everywhere. Clara sprinted toward the dining room. She found Sophia on the floor, her wheelchair tipped over. Nurse Beatrice was cowering under the table. Sophia! Clara slid across the floor, grabbing the girl. Clara, I'm scared. I've got you. Clara scooped the child up. She wasn't strong enough to run fast with a 7-year-old, but she had to try. Suddenly, the back door of the kitchen was kicked in. 2 men in black tactical gear stormed in. They weren't police. They wore masks with a silver viper emblem stitched on the neck. The Valentis, the rival family. One of the men spotted Clara. He raised his rifle. Don't shoot the girl, the other shouted. The boss wants her alive. She's the leverage. The man marched forward, grabbing Clara by the hair. She screamed, lashing out, clawing at his face. She managed to rip his mask slightly, revealing a scar on his chin. Let her go. Enzo appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, his suit covered in dust, his gun raised. But he was too late. The second gunman had a pistol pressed to Sophia's head. Drop it, Moretti, the gunman shouted. Drop it, or the miracle child dies. Enzo froze. His eyes were wide, filled with a terror Clara had never seen. Slowly, he lowered his gun. He placed it on the floor. Let them go, Enzo said, his voice shaking. Take me. I'm the one you want. The gunman laughed. No, Enzo. You took our shipment. You humiliated the Valentis. We don't want you dead. We want you to suffer. The man holding Clara pistol-whipped her. The world exploded in white light, and she crumpled to the floor, semi-conscious. Through her blurring vision, she saw them dragging Sophia away. She heard Sophia screaming, "Daddy, Clara! No!" Enzo lunged forward, but the gunman shot him. Enzo fell back, clutching his shoulder blood, spurting through his fingers. The men dragged Sophia out the back door into the night. Clara lay on the cold tiles, her vision fading to black. The last thing she saw was Enzo, the invincible Mafia Don, crawling across the floor toward the door, leaving a trail of blood reaching out for the daughter he had just lost again. The silence that followed the raid was heavier than the gunfire. The kitchen looked like a slaughterhouse, shattered porcelain bullet holes in the custom cabinetry, and blood, too much blood, smearing the pristine white marble. Clara gasped, pulling herself up from the cold floor. Her head throbbed where the pistol had struck her, a warm trickle of blood running down her temple. "Enzo," she croaked. Enzo Moretti was propped up against the refrigerator, his face the color of ash. His left hand was clamped tight over his right shoulder blood, seeping through his fingers in a steady, dark rhythm. "Go!" Enzo wheezed, his teeth gritted in agony. Call the capos. Tell them. Code red." Clara didn't call anyone. She scrambled over to him, her medical training overriding her terror. She peeled his hand away. The bullet had passed through the deltoid, missing the bone, but nicking the artery. It was a through and through, but he was losing blood fast. "We need an ambulance," Clara said, pressing her palm against the wound. "No hospitals," Enzo snarled, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. "Police. Questions. Child Services takes Sophia. No. You'll bleed out. Then fix it." Enzo stared at her, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "You're a surgeon. Fix me, then we get her back." Clara looked at the wound, then at the man. He was right. If they went public, the Valentis would kill Sophia to eliminate the witness. They were on their own. "I need your med kit from the gym," Clara ordered, her voice hardening. "And vodka. And a sewing kit." 10 minutes later, Enzo Moretti lay on his own kitchen island, while Clara Holloway performed field surgery without anesthesia. She poured the high-proof vodka over the wound to sterilize it. Enzo didn't scream. He just bit down on a leather belt until his jaw popped. Clara's hands, usually steady for delicate spinal work, were slick with sweat. She used a pair of sterilized tweezers to remove debris, then threaded a needle. "Talk to me," Clara said, piercing his skin. "Keep yourself conscious." Enzo hissed through his teeth. The alarm didn't go off. The perimeter sensors were dead. "What does that mean?" Clara tied off the first suture. "It means someone turned them off. Someone inside. Who has access? Only 3 people. Me, you." Enzo's eyes fluttered, then focused. "And Luca." Clara froze. Luca, the head of security. The man who had driven her to the house on her first day. The man who had smiled at Sophia just yesterday. "Luca was guarding the back gate," Clara whispered. "That's where they came in." "He sold us," Enzo spat. 10 years. He sold my daughter for cash." Clara finished the last stitch. She bandaged the wound tightly with compression tape. "You've lost a liter of blood. You need fluids. You can't fight." Enzo sat up, swaying dangerously. He grabbed the counter to steady himself. "I don't need blood. I need a gun." He stumbled toward the hidden panel in the pantry, punching in a code. The wall slid open to reveal an armory that would make a SWAT team jealous. Enzo grabbed a fresh shirt, wincing as he pulled it over his bandages, then strapped on a tactical vest. He loaded a Sig Sauer P226 and handed a smaller Glock 43 to Clara. "Do you know how to use this?" Clara looked at the heavy metal object. "I heal people. I don't shoot them. Tonight you might have to do both." Enzo checked the slide. "Luca has a tracker in his car. Standard protocol for my lieutenants." I just pulled the log. "He's at the desolate shipping yards in Newark. Section 4. "That's Valenti territory," Clara said. "Yes, it's where they kill people, where no one can hear the screams." Enzo walked toward the garage. He looked back at her. "Stay here, Clara. Lock the doors." Clara grabbed the Glock and followed him. "She's my patient, and you can barely walk straight. You drive, I'll keep you awake." "But I am coming." Enzo looked at her for a long second. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had made her defy him to heal his daughter. He nodded once. "Get in the car." The Newark shipping yards were a graveyard of rusted metal and industrial decay. The fog rolled in off the bay, thick and smelling of salt and diesel. Enzo parked the black SUV a half-mile away under the shadow of a crane. The loss of blood was catching up to him. His skin was clammy, and his movements were a fraction of a second too slow. "Here," Clara whispered, handing him 2 ibuprofen and a bottle of water. "It's not much, but it will help the fever." Enzo swallowed them dry. There, the warehouse with the yellow light. They moved through the shadows, avoiding the floodlights. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was a doctor from the Upper East Side. She shouldn't be creeping through a mafia kill zone with a gun in her pocket. But every time she wanted to turn back, she remembered Sophia's terrified scream. They reached the side door of the warehouse. Enzo bypassed the electronic lock with a decoder device he pulled from his vest. The lock clicked green. They slipped inside. The warehouse was cavernous, stacked high with shipping crates. In the center, under a ring of harsh halogen lights, was a clearing. There, tied to a wooden chair, was Sophia. She was crying silently, her head bowed. Standing over her was Marco Valenti, the head of the rival family. He was a small, rat-faced man in an expensive suit. Next to him stood Luca the traitor, looking nervous. "Stop crying," Valenti shouted, slapping the back of Sophia's head. Clara lunged forward, but Enzo's arm shot out, pinning her to the wall. "Wait," he mouthed. "When is he coming?" Valenti asked Luca. "You said he'd come for the girl." "He's bleeding out, boss," Luca said, checking his watch. "I saw the hit. Shoulder shot, arterial spray. He's probably dead in his kitchen by now." "If he's dead, the girl is useless," Valenti sneered. "We kill her, send the body to the commission and claim the Moretti territory." "No," Sophia sobbed. "My daddy isn't dead. He's going to get you." "Your daddy is worm food, little girl." Valenti pulled a revolver from his jacket. He pointed it at Sophia. Enzo didn't wait. He stepped out from behind the crates 20 yards away. His aim was steady, despite the blood loss. "Valenti!" Enzo roared. Marco Valenti spun around. Bang! Bang! Enzo fired 2 shots. One took a guard on the catwalk down. The other shattered the light fixture above Valenti, plunging the center of the room into semi-darkness. "Kill him!" Valenti screamed, diving behind a crate. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the air, chipping the concrete floor. "Clara, get to Sophia!" Enzo shouted, laying down suppression fire. "I'll draw them off." Enzo broke cover, running to the left, firing his Sig Sauer with deadly precision. He was a force of nature, running on pure adrenaline and rage. He took a bullet to the tactical vest, grunted, but kept moving, drawing the 3 remaining guards away from the center. Clara sprinted toward Sophia. "Clara!" Sophia shrieked. Clara reached to the chair. She holstered her gun and frantically worked on the ropes. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." "Look out!" Sophia screamed. Clara turned. Luca was there. The traitorous bodyguard lunged at Clara, tackling her to the concrete. He was twice her size. He pinned her down, his hands closing around her throat. "You should have stayed cleaning toilets, Doc," Luca snarled, squeezing. Clara clawed at his face, gasping for air. Black spots danced in her vision. She couldn't breathe. She reached for her belt, but the gun had skittered away. "Clara!" Sophia cried, struggling against her loosened ropes. Clara's hand scrabbled on the floor. Her fingers brushed against something sharp, a shard of the shattered light bulb. She gripped it. With her last ounce of strength, she swung her arm in a tight arc and drove the glass shard into the side of Luca's neck. Luca gasped, his eyes bulging. He let go of her throat, clutching his neck as blood spurted between his fingers. He collapsed sideways, gurgling. Clara rolled over, coughing violently, inhaling sweet, dusty air. She scrambled up, grabbed a knife from Luca's belt, and slashed Sophia's ropes. "Run!" Clara rasped, grabbing Sophia's hand. "Run to the exit, not without Daddy." Across the warehouse, the gunfire had stopped. Clara froze. "Enzo." Silence. Then a laugh. It was Valenti. "Come out, Dr. Hayes," Valenti shouted. "Or should I say Dr. Halloway? I did my research, too." Clara stepped out from behind the crates, pulling Sophia behind her. In the center of the room, Enzo was on his knees. He had run out of ammo. 2 guards had their rifles trained on him. Valenti stood over him, pressing the barrel of his revolver against Enzo's forehead. Enzo looked bad. His bandages had soaked through. He was pale, sweating profusely. He looked at Clara and shook his head slightly. "Don't come out. Let him go." Clara said, her voice shaking but loud. She raised the Glock she had recovered from the floor. Her hands were trembling. "Drop the gun, sweetheart," Valenti smiled. "Or I paint the floor with his brains." Clara hesitated. "Do it." Valenti cocked the hammer. Clara slowly lowered the gun. She kicked it away. "Good," Valenti sneered. "Now bring the girl here. We're going to have a little family reunion before I end the Moretti line for good." Clara walked forward, Sophia clutching her hand. She looked at Enzo. He looked defeated, his eyes full of apology. "I failed you," his eyes said. But Clara wasn't looking at his eyes. She was looking at his hand. It was resting on his thigh, inches away from a hidden boot knife she knew he carried. She needed a distraction. She needed 1 second of confusion. Clara looked at Valenti. "Wait, you don't want to kill him yet?" "Oh." Valenti raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because," Clara said, her mind racing, "he doesn't have the codes to the offshore accounts. I do." Valenti paused. Greed flickered in his eyes. I'm the one who handles the medical trusts," Clara lied, stepping closer. $50 million in bearer bonds, in a Swiss account. If you kill him, the biometric lock seals it forever. But I know the bypass. It was complete gibberish. But greed makes men stupid. Is that true? Valenti looked down at Enzo. Enzo didn't hesitate. He played along. "Don't tell him, Clara," he shouted, feigning panic. Valenti laughed. Well, well, looks like the Maid is the golden goose." He turned his gun slightly away from Enzo's head, pointing it toward Clara. "Tell me the code." "Come closer," Clara whispered. Valenti took a step toward her. That was the mistake. Enzo moved. It was a blur of motion. He snatched the boot knife, surged upward, and drove the blade into Valenti's thigh. Valenti screamed, the gun firing wildly into the ceiling. Enzo tackled him. They rolled on the floor. The other two guards raised their rifles, but they couldn't shoot without hitting their boss. "Sophia, get down!" Clara screamed, diving for the discarded Glock. She grabbed it. She rolled onto her back. She aimed at the guard on the left. She remembered her anatomy classes: thoracic cavity, center mass. She pulled the trigger. The gun kicked hard. The guard dropped. The second guard swung his rifle toward her. Bang! A shot rang out from the floor. Enzo, entangled with Valenti, had managed to wrestle the revolver free. He shot the second guard in the chest. Valenti, bleeding and desperate, scrambled backward, trying to reach a dropped knife. Enzo stood up. He swayed, blood dripping from his shoulder, but he stood tall. He looked like the angel of death. He walked over to Valenti. "Please," Valenti begged, holding up a hand. "Enzo, we can make a deal. Half my territory." "You touched my daughter," Enzo said softly. "Enzo, wait. There are no deals for child killers." Enzo raised the revolver and fired once. Silence returned to the warehouse, absolute and final. Enzo dropped the gun. He turned toward Clara and Sophia. He took one step, reached out his hand, and then his eyes rolled back. He collapsed face forward onto the concrete. "Daddy!" Sophia screamed. Clara was there in a second, turning him over. He wasn't breathing. His pulse was thready, almost non-existent. The exertion had torn his artery completely open. "No, no, no," Clara sobbed, ripping her shirt to make a compress. "Enzo, stay with me. You don't get to die now, not after all this," she began. CPR. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Come on!" she screamed, pounding on his chest. Sophia knelt beside her, holding her father's hand, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, please wake up. I can walk, Daddy, I can walk. Please watch me walk." Clara pumped his chest. "Come on, Enzo." But he didn't move. The helicopter ride was a blur of noise and flashing lights. Clara wasn't just a passenger, she was the lifeline. While the flight medic worked the defibrillator, Clara was clamping the artery with her bare hands, screaming orders over the roar of the rotors. "Push 2 milligrams of epinephrine. Do not let him flatline again." They touched down on the helipad of New York Presbyterian. A trauma team was waiting, swarming the stretcher like white ants. "Who is the patient?" the trauma surgeon shouted as they ran toward the OR doors. "Lorenzo Moretti. Gunshot wound to the right deltoid, severed axillary artery, massive hemorrhagic shock. He's been down for 12 minutes. Clara rattled off the stats with the precision of a machine. Though her hands were shaking so hard, she could barely let go of the gurney. "We got it from here, doctor," the surgeon said, recognizing the authority in her voice, even through her torn, blood-stained clothes. The doors swung shut, sealing Enzo away. Clara stood there in the sterile hallway, looking at her hands. They were covered in his blood. "Clara." A small voice broke through the haze. Sophia was sitting in a wheelchair by the nurse's station, wrapped in a foil shock blanket. She looked tiny and broken. Clara walked over and collapsed to her knees, hugging the girl. They didn't speak. They just held on to each other, the only two people in the world who understood the cost of this night. The next 48 hours were an agonizing purgatory. The hospital wing was locked down. The remaining Moretti soldiers patrolled the corridors, suits grim hands near their waistbands. But they let Clara pass. She was no longer the help. She was the savior. Clara sat by Enzo's bedside in the ICU. He was hooked up to a ventilator, a web of tubes keeping him tethered to the living world. He looked pale, almost translucent, but the rhythm on the monitor was steady. Beep, beep, beep. She held his hand. "You promised," she whispered to his unconscious form. "You said Morettis always pay their debts. You owe me a life, Enzo. Wake up and pay it." On the third morning, the sun was streaming through the blinds, hitting the linoleum floor. Clara had fallen asleep in the uncomfortable plastic chair, her head resting on the bed rail. She felt a hand brush her hair. Clara bolted upright. Enzo was awake. His eyes were heavy, drugged, but open. He was looking at her with an expression of pure exhaustion and something else, something softer. "You?" Enzo rasped his throat dry from the intubation tube that had just been removed. "You talk in your sleep." Clara let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. She grabbed a cup of ice chips and fed him one. "And you sleep too much." Enzo swallowed the ice. He looked around the room, then panic flickered in his eyes. "Sophia, she's safe," Clara promised, squeezing his hand. "She's with Mrs. Rossi in the family waiting room. She's walking Enzo. She walked into the hospital to see you yesterday." Enzo closed his eyes, a single tear leaking out. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving with emotion. "And Valenti?" "Dead," Clara said, her voice hard. "The police ruled it self-defense. My testimony cleared you. The Valenti family has dissolved. You won." Enzo looked at her. He squeezed her hand, his grip weak but determined. "I didn't win. We won." He pulled her closer. Clara leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "I know who you are now, Clara," Enzo whispered. "Not Dr. Hayes, not just Dr. Halloway. You are the woman who saved my soul." "I was just doing my job," she whispered back. "No," Enzo said. He turned his head and kissed the palm of her hand. "You were doing what a mother would do." The word hung in the air, heavy and sweet. 1 year later. The garden of the Saddle River estate was in full bloom. It was no longer a fortress. The high walls remained, but the gates were open. Music floated through the air, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. Tables were set with white linens and crystal. The elite of New York were there, but not just the underworld figures. Doctors, politicians, and neighbors mingled with the men in sharp suits. Clara stood on the terrace, smoothing the skirt of her silk dress. It was ivory, simple, but elegant. She wore a necklace of sapphires, Enzo's gift. Nervous? Enzo stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He wore a tuxedo that fit perfectly, his shoulder fully healed, though a scar remained a reminder of the night everything changed. "A little," Clara admitted, leaning back into him. "It's a big day." "It's just a party," Enzo teased, kissing her neck. "It's not just a party. It's the opening of the foundation." They looked out at the lawn. A banner hung between 2 oak trees, the Sophia Moretti Foundation for Pediatric Spinal Recovery. And there in the center of the lawn was the miracle. Sophia, now 8 years old, was running. She wasn't fast, and she wore lightweight carbon fiber braces on her lower legs. But she was running. She was chasing a golden retriever puppy, laughing her dark curls, bouncing in the sunlight. There was no wheelchair in sight. She tripped on the grass and fell. Clara gasped and started to move forward, but Enzo held her back. "Wait," he whispered. "Watch." Sophia didn't cry. She didn't look for help. She placed her hands on the ground, pushed her knees up, and stood. She brushed the grass off her dress, yelled "Gotcha!" at the dog, and kept running. Enzo smiled, a look of profound peace on his face that Clara had never thought possible when she first walked into his library. "She doesn't need us anymore," Enzo said. "She'll always need us," Clara corrected. "Just differently." Enzo turned Clara around to face him. The dangerous Don was gone, replaced by a man who had everything he ever wanted right in his arms. "I have a new contract for you," Enzo said, reaching into his pocket. "Oh, is the pay good?" Clara smiled. "The pay is terrible," Enzo said, his eyes twinkling. "Long hours, difficult boss, no vacation days, and you have to deal with a very stubborn teenager eventually." He dropped to one knee. The chatter in the garden died down as guests realized what was happening. Sophia stopped running and covered her mouth with her hands, grinning. Enzo pulled out a velvet box. Inside sat a diamond that caught the sunlight, fracturing it into 1,000 rainbows. "Clara Holloway," Enzo said, his voice ringing clear across the silent garden. "You walked into the lion's den and tamed the beast. You gave my daughter her legs, and you gave me my heart. Will you marry us?" Clara looked at him, then at Sophia, who was giving her 2 thumbs up from the lawn. She looked back at the man who had been a villain, a protector, and now her love. "Yes," Clara whispered, tears spilling over. "Yes, I will." Enzo stood and kissed her a deep, passionate kiss that sealed the promise. The garden erupted in applause. Sophia ran over on her own 2 feet and hugged their legs, burying her face in the folds of Clara's dress. As the sun set over the estate, casting long golden shadows across the grass, Clara realized that the cage was gone. They were free, and for the first time in a long time, the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to run toward, and that is the incredible story of The Silent Step. Who would have thought that a disgraced doctor and a dangerous mafia don could find salvation in each other? It just goes to show that sometimes the people who are broken are the best at fixing each other. What did you think of Enzo's transformation? Do you think he deserved a second chance after his life of crime? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want more dramatic romances and twisted thrillers, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.